I started telling her, hey, I'm excited about this. I'm excited to meet you. I'd love to learn from you. She goes, really? Would you like? So she starts asking me questions and she sees immediately, dude, I am in scarcity. Like I'm a miser. And she says these words. She goes, I wonder what it's like living in the financial prison that you built for your wife. Because my wife's a teacher and I won't buy her clothes. Her mom's buying her clothes. I'm making 6 figures at this time. We're living in a crappy apartment where we can afford something much, much nicer. But I was like, no. We're going to save. We're going to scrimp. We're going to budget. I was that miser. And when she said those words, dude, it hit me. And I called my wife and I was like, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't see it, but now I see it. And my wife was really cool and forgiving, but I actually started crying. And then people get let out of the session. I'm just sitting there cheering up like, oh, look at that kid. He's so proud of his award, or whatever.
My guest today is Garrett Gunderson. He is the founder of Wealth Factory and a best-selling author and all-around financial genius. Garrett, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks, man. Good to be here.
Sure thing, brother. I appreciate it. I'm kind of shocked to have you. I'm having a little bit of like celebrity moment here. I'm sorry.
I like it, man. I've been eating healthy today, got my workout in, so I'm prepared,
Perfect, man. I would imagine that a brain like yours can't work at the capacity that it does without having those things at least a little bit handled.
Yeah, I think I've been a little bit more loose about my nutrition for the last year, but been very consistent for a long time now with overall working out and sleep and, some of those major factors. So.
Cool, man. That's great. That actually brings me to a little bit of a story. I want to tell just the audience how we met. I've been talking you up like crazy all week in my Facebook groups, and we'll have some questions we'll hit later from clients and everything. But so I actually, I want to apologize in advance if I ever get long-winded, because full disclosure, I am now a client of Wealth Factory. I have been for 6 to 8 months or something like that. And it's just been a whirlwind of you just changing my mind on everything. It's been ridiculous. And now I know what Rob meant. I was introduced to your work by our mutual friend, Rob Wolf. And he posted this random selfie of you two. And he was like, I think of my life in 2 phases, like pre-Garrett and post-Garrett. So I reached out to him. I said, who's this dude? And he confirmed everything that you guys had done for him. And I think I was a client of yours less than 48 hours later. I think it was that quick.
What's awesome is, so Rob is attending one of our workshops, right? And he comes up and he's like, hey man, can you sign my book? The book, The Killing Sacred Cows. And I look and I'm like, why does he look so familiar? And I look down his name tag. I'm like, if you sign my book, man, I'm like, Paleo Solution rocked my world when I read it. Like, I'm going to go to my house, I'm going to get it. And so I signed his book. He signed mine. I've always been an admirer of his stuff. So
I love that, man. That's so cool. I love how the universe works like that. And speaking of the universe, man, I want to talk about how you got here, because I have read all of your books now. I've consumed all your content, your YouTube videos, your podcast, everything, man. I just am all down the rabbit hole. So I just want to let people know that your background, the way you grew up and everything didn't scream financial genius, So can you tell people how you got here?
Yeah, man, I'm from a coal mining town in the south central area of Utah called Price. And a lot of coal mines down there, Carbon County. My dad, my grandfathers, my great-grandfather, all coal miners. So, they didn't know a lot about money. They just kind of knew a lot about hard work. And what's funny is I've never stepped a foot in a coal mine. My mom was adamantly opposed to it. My dad, I told him a year ago, I'm like, I'm going to take my boys and show them a coal mine. He goes, why the hell would you do that? He's still charged up about it, So what happened was I had a business and I was just detailing cars because I was playing sports. And so I wanted to have more money, but I couldn't really hold a full-time or part-time job because of the inconsistency of traveling for baseball or basketball. So I just started detailing cars because my dad's coal mining vehicles that he'd have to bring home for the bosses, I helped him clean them. My mom worked at a credit union. I started to clean the repossessed vehicles, and that got me my start. And I won $500 when I was 16 years old for young entrepreneur. I took 3rd place. The next year I took 1st place. Then I took it for the state. With all those winnings, it was $6,500, which isn't a lot of money, but to me was a lot of money. And I wanted to learn how to invest it. So I went down this road of what could I do with this money? And that got me into the world of finance. I made mistakes when I was 18, investing it in a stock market that was overhyped, then was going to over deliver, and then just was infinitely curious and met a money manager that was my professor. And at 19, I became friends with him, and he became a client while I was still in college because I learned a few strategies that were out of his wheelhouse, even though he mentored me early on. And he's still a client 20 some years later now. So that was pretty instrumental. And I just went on this trek when I was a junior where I would just fly somewhere every month to interview or attend an event to learn how finance really worked. And because I had to learn and I didn't have a lot of background, I just learned how to ask questions that other people didn't know how to ask. And I didn't have I didn't have a dog in the fight, man. Like whatever the answer was, didn't really matter to me. I just wanted to figure it out. So I wasn't married. I didn't have a lot of loans to pay off. I didn't have a lot to lose. So I didn't have this kind of bias that a lot of people have in this search because they're relying on a paycheck. I wasn't relying on that at that point. And so it was a huge advantage. One, because I was young, people would talk to me. Like people will talk to young people who are ambitious. It's such an advantage. And people are like, oh, dude, once you get older, I'm like, once I get older, like I have ins that no one else has right now.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to learn. I was fascinated. My wife last night, we were watching something and someone did the cheesiest joke in finance. We were watching some show. And she goes, that's how you used to be. Yeah, you used to be like that. You wouldn't last as my old business partner. I'm like, ouch, yeah. She's just straight up calling me a nerd, man. Like no punches pulled. So that's a lot of the background right there.
That's cool, man. And I know you talk about experiences with your wife too, because, well, one, I want to touch on just how similar this is to fitness and nutrition. I tell people this all the time. It's like, I came into this by accident, man. I've been a professional musician. I still am for 17 years. I don't pay myself with my nutrition company. So it's like, I don't have a dog in the fight. It just became this, I dug deep and I had done well in the music industry. So I had free time to research and just found that everything mainstream was like horrific advice, So I started sharing this, and it's kind of what I say when I've introduced a lot of people to your work now, and I kind of give this warning, the same warning I give with myself. Where I'm like, hey, you start consuming my content, like fair warning, it's a lot of this stuff is going to go directly against what the mainstream's telling you to do. And the crazy thing about that is I like to tell people in the world of health and wellness, we're dealing with a population that's 85% overweight and obese. And yet around the dinner table, everyone has these super strong held beliefs in nutrition, and they don't really know why. And now that I've gone down the rabbit hole of your content, finance seems to be the same way, man. And I mean, I think you'll know the statistics better than I do, but it's something like 80% of people can't afford a $400 emergency, but they have these really strong beliefs about like their 401k or their investing and all this. And I think it's just it starts with, I know that you start with philosophy, and that's why I brought up, you have some funny stories I heard you tell about with your wife. Your philosophy wasn't always this abundance mindset. And like, how do you get that abundance mindset and abundance versus scarcity in the world of finance? I think you call it like the greatest destroyer of wealth, right?
Yeah. Scarcity destroys wealth faster and more. There's more like just reach of scarcity than any other thing. And like, dude, when I was first married, it's amazing I'm still married because I was a straight up miser. Straight up miser. Like my wife, so I gave this TEDx talk in January and I told a couple miser stories. And so I call my wife, I'm with one of my clients and one of my guys that runs my company, it's a friend. And then my client brought someone with them and we're just riding in the car. And I'm like, hey, it went well, I got a standing ovation. I was like super pumped up. I'm like, I told stories about being a miser. And then all of a sudden my wife chimes in with all these additional stories and everybody in the car is cracking up. I'm like, whoa, I can't hear you. We're breaking up. Shit. Like, because dude, I was such a miser that for Christmas one year, I bought her a phone a case for her phone that didn't fit the phone because it was cheap.
Okay.
Like it didn't even fit the phone. No, it was $1. Like, so we saved a bunch of money. She's like, but it doesn't fit the phone.
Exactly.
And like her dad was like, hey, you want to move into the basement? Cause like you guys could just live there rent free. So I go to my wife, I'm like, dude, we get to live in your parents' basement rent free. She goes, sex free with that strategy too. And I was like, oh, damn. So I was like, yeah, dude, I was a miser. I read The Millionaire Next Door. And so my life was about what I could cut out and eliminate. And I had this epiphany that's a very finite game. That's very limited because it's really selfish. Like you don't think of it as selfish when you're in it. You think of it as like smart or, doing things other people aren't willing to do and sacrificing. And my mantra was, I'll live like no one else lives now. So in the future, I can live like no one else can. Mm-hmm. My dad was like, hey, I respect that, but I don't think that's the right philosophy. He says, because you can never buy back the memories you never have. Mm. So what happened was I was at this thing in Vegas where I was getting an award. and there's like 1,000 people there. And after I got the award, I was out in the hallway and I see this woman, Nancy. And actually the event where Rob, heard me the first time, Nancy happened to be in the crowd. Now this is like 17 years later, but when I got this award, Nancy and I were talking because I highly respected her. She was well known in the financial industry. And I started telling her, hey, I'm excited about this. I'm excited to meet you. I'd love to learn from you. She goes, really? Would you? Like, so she starts asking me questions. And she sees immediately, dude, I am in scarcity. Like, I'm a miser. And she says these words. She goes, I wonder what it's like living in the financial prison that you built for your wife. Because my wife's a teacher and I won't buy her clothes. Her mom's buying her clothes. I'm making 6 figures at this time. We're living in a crappy apartment where we can afford something much, much nicer. But I was like, no. We're going to save. We're going to scrimp. We're going to budget. I was that miser. And when she said those words, dude, it hit me. And I called my wife and I was like, hey, I'm sorry. I'm an asshole. Like, I didn't see it, but now I see it. And my wife was really cool and forgiving, but I actually started crying. And then people get let out of the session. I'm just sitting there chin up like, oh, look at that kid. He's so proud of his award, or whatever it was. But it was actually just recognizing how much scarcity had grabbed me. But dude, I learned it. I learned it from my family. Imagine my great-grandfather leaves Italy, leaves his wife who's pregnant behind because he can't afford to bring her over at the time, to get a job in a coal mine to send money back, and doesn't see them for 7 years. That creates a lot of scarcity, like almost at a cellular level. It creates a paradigm where it's like scrimp and save and sacrifice. It's almost like this immigrant mentality. And it really had a stranglehold on me until that moment. Now, it wasn't like I had an epiphany and never had scarcity again, but it was a paradigm shift that was crazy, because that next year I made double what I made the year before, and we bought our dream home. And like, that home we loved it. Like, I used to bring people over. We hosted monthly parties. We had theme parties. We just had so much fun and so many good memories, where in our apartment, we could never do that. It was constrained. And I remember the utility was so cheap and dilapidated. So that's part of like the transition for me of leaving behind scarcity and embracing abundance. And then I can at least now detect when it's coming up. I can sense when it's there, so I can make different choices because I have very specific formulas.
Want to master your money? Want to figure out the things that you could do to improve your finances? Click here and check out more videos like this on Money Matters.